Rain poured down like the sky itself was crying. A teenage boy stood beneath a flickering streetlight, clutching a crumpled letter in his trembling hands. It wasn't just a rejection letter, it was the last thread of hope snapping apart. His shoes were soaked, his hoodie clung to his skin, but he didn't move. He just stared at that piece of paper. The words "we're sorry" burned into his heart. Everyone had told him he wouldn't make it, that dreams were only for the lucky ones, and for a moment he almost believed them. But as the wind howled through the empty streets, something inside him whispered, "Not yet." Because sometimes the greatest stories begin right where everything seems to end. He lived in a small, cracked-walled room at the edge of the city, a place where dreams were often traded for survival. Every morning he'd wake to the sound of factory sirens and the rumble of buses heading somewhere better, somewhere he couldn't reach. His mother worked endless shifts cleaning other people's houses, and his father had disappeared years ago, leaving behind only debt and a silent photograph on the wall. He was 17, but life had already aged him far beyond his years. At school, he was the quiet boy sitting in the back, the one wearing the same faded hoodie every day, trying to hide the holes in his shoes. Teachers overlooked him, classmates mocked him, and yet he carried a secret dream in his chest. A dream to build something great, something that would make his mother proud. But dreams didn't pay rent. So after school, he worked at a mechanic shop. Grease on his hands, sweat on his face, and exhaustion in his bones. Still, every night, before sleep, he'd open his old notebook and sketch ideas, designs for things no one else believed he could create. Sometimes hunger kept him awake, sometimes hope did. But the world had a cruel way of testing those who dreamed too loudly. When he shared his ideas, people laughed. "Kid, you're just a poor boy fixing tires. Who do you think you are?" they'd say. Each word was a stone thrown at his faith. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a tiny flame refused to die. Because even when the world told him he was nothing, he couldn't stop believing that he was meant for something. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into quiet hopelessness. NHE was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the kind that came from fighting a losing battle. One evening, while returning from the mechanic shop, he passed an old man's street stall, a small wooden cart with flickering lamps and rusty tools. The man sat there fixing broken watches with slow, patient hands. The boy stopped and watched for a moment. The old man smiled, noticing him. "Hard day?" he asked. The boy nodded. "Feels like every day's hard," the old man chuckled softly. "Do you know what keeps these old watches running, boy? It's not the gears, it's the balance. Even if one small piece breaks, it stops. Life's the same. Balance it with hope, no matter how broken it feels." Those words lingered in his mind like a spark in darkness. For days, he couldn't forget them. He started staying late after work, saving scraps of metal, broken circuits, and spare wires from the shop. He began building small things, fixing a broken fan for a neighbor, repairing toys for kids. Each time he fixed something, he felt something fix inside him too. It wasn't much, but it was his. For the first time, he felt capable. The old man's words echoed every night. Balance it with hope. And soon, his notebook wasn't just sketches anymore. It was blueprints. Blueprints of a future he was slowly starting to believe in again. He didn't know it then, but that small spark, born under a flickering streetlight, would one day ignite a fire the world couldn't ignore. The days grew longer, and the nights colder, but he didn't stop. Every morning he woke before the sun, his hands raw from labor, his body exhausted, but his mind alive with ideas. He experimented with scraps of metal and discarded electronics, building small machines that barely worked at first. Failures were constant. Screws came loose, wires shorted, parts shattered. Yet he kept trying. Every failure was a lesson, every setback a stepping stone. At school, he still wore the same faded hoodie, still sat in the back, but his notebook was different now. Blueprints, calculations, and sketches filled the pages, detailed plans for inventions no one else could imagine. Classmates laughed less now. Teachers glanced at him with curiosity, and for the first time he felt a quiet pride swell in his chest. He worked at the mechanic shop during the day and labored in his small room at night. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford, hunger a constant companion, but he learned to live with both. Every small success, a repaired fan, a working motor, a toy brought to life, fueled him further. One evening, as the city lights flickered, he completed something that actually worked. A small, automated contraption, simple in design, but elegant in execution. He watched it move, perfectly timed, and for the first time, the boy who had been dismissed as nothing felt the thrill of possibility. He realized then that progress wasn't instant, it wasn't loud, and it certainly wasn't easy. But it was real. Step by step, failure by failure, he was climbing. And as he climbed, a fire grew within him. Not a fiery anger, but a steady, unyielding flame. Because the boy knew now, deep in his bones, the higher he climbed, the closer he came to everything he had ever dreamed of. Just when things seemed to be going his way, the storm hit. The small victories he had fought for were fragile, and life reminded him that nothing comes easy. A mentor he had trusted disappeared with his prototype, leaving him empty-handed. The project he had spent months building was gone in a single crushing moment. Rumors spread, mocking him. Even now, he can't succeed, people whispered. He locked himself in his room, staring at the empty desk, the plans shredded in his mind. For the first time, despair crept close enough to whisper, "Give up. You're not meant for this." He felt the weight of exhaustion, hunger, and loneliness all at once. Tears streaked down his face, not of shame, but of raw frustration. But then he remembered the old man's words. Balance it with hope. The tiny flame inside, the spark that had survived ridicule, hunger, and failure, refused to die. He picked up his tools with trembling hands. He started over, slower, more careful, wiser. Every piece he rebuilt carried the lessons of his past mistakes. Every night became a battle of sweat, blood, and faith. And one night, as the rain tapped against the window, he finished something extraordinary. It wasn't just a machine, it was a testament to endurance, to refusing to surrender when the world demanded it. He had faced the storm, betrayal, loss, and despair, and stood taller for it. The climb had been treacherous, but the boy had learned the most important lesson. Storms do not break you. They reveal who you really are. And the boy, once doubted by everyone, now knew the truth. Nothing could stop the fire that burns within a soul determined to rise. Months passed, and every drop of sweat, every sleepless night, every failure he endured began to take shape. The boy who had once been mocked, forgotten, and dismissed, now stood on the edge of something extraordinary. His small inventions, built with nothing but scraps, started attracting attention. Neighbors came to see what the quiet boy in the faded hoodie had been creating. Teachers who once overlooked him now asked questions, curious about the boy who refused to give up. Then came the day when a local innovation competition announced its winners. He entered quietly, unsure if his work would even be noticed. But when the results were announced, his name was called, not first, not second, but as the recipient of a special award for ingenuity and resilience. Tears welled up in his eyes as he stepped onto the stage. The crowd clapped, and for the first time, he felt seen. He looked at his mother, standing in the back with a proud smile, and realized every struggle, every hardship, every storm had led him here. He hadn't just survived, he had risen. From the boy who had nothing, who had been told he was worthless, he had built something meaningful, something that mattered. And as he held the small trophy in his hands, he remembered the lessons that had carried him this far. Balance hope with hard work. Learn from every failure. Never let the world define your limits. The boy who once dreamed quietly in a small, cracked-walled room had become a symbol, a living proof that greatness isn't given, it's earned. And though his journey had begun with nothing, it had led him to everything. Because he refused to give up, even when the storm seemed endless. Because he believed, when no one else did. And because sometimes, the greatest victories are the ones we fight for alone, with nothing but hope and determination as our companions.